Well, hello. Anyone who's been watching, there's a couple. This is take two. It turns out that I made an absolute ass of pulling down the project, committing to it, and then pushing it up. What I tried to do is I tried to use this template, which includes like a boilerplate layout for how you should lay out which is a template for laying out a GoLang project, right? It's not official. It's not like a GoLang approved thing, but a lot of projects are following this type of structure. So I used that, but what I did was I committed on top of the Git repo, like some kind of junior or rookie. And then I thought, well, do you know what? It's fine because I'll just squish it all down to one commit, force push. I did that and it reverted all of my changes and put the project back to the same commit it was when I pulled it, just as one flat commit. And I'd also run GC. So I had no object files to go back to. I had no references to go back to. I had no commits to go back to. So I've literally just spent the last hour, well, 40 minutes or so, doing everything that I did in the previous one. However, one of the great things about doing something twice is that you'll learn from it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to continue with the Copper Monkey, which is a payment platform. And this payment platform is going to allow us to process billions of payment requests per millisecond, maybe a bit lower. And that is going to process it with multiple different payment mechanics. At the moment, probably going to just start off with something simple, like Stripe. But at the moment, the first thing that I'm going to build is the first part of this journey, which is the mechanics for taking a request. Whether you're on a CRM or a website, or it's part of an auditing system, or it's part of a payment platform, there is a trigger that says, I want this customer to pay this amount. And do you know what? The body of it is something like let's move that down. The body of it is something like a GUID event, which is going to be random, which is going to be auto-generated. It's going to be the event ID, the type of event that we want it to be. So that's client payment request command. And I decided to maybe stop that and make the type a add client payment request, date, customer ID, and amount could be a good thing. So for instance, that could be like maybe £15.99. Yeah. Now I'm not going to worry about internationalization yet, the day one. So this is going to be a payment request. We're going to save this now to some Cosmos DB somewhere. Let's save that. So this is the first bit we were going to do. If I head over to NeoVim in this project, just to show you what I've got. So we've got a command folder, which is going to hold all of our commands. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create these little satellite utilities that are going to help us do the things that this program or this system is going to do. So using these utilities, I can do everything. I can put a payment request in, I can process a payment, I can cancel a payment, I could ask the customer to be reimbursed, whatever the payment system can do, I'll be able to do using these commands, these programs. And there will also be an API that will run the same stuff. So the first thing I'm doing at the moment is green. And this is going to be the main, which is just an executable, right? Let's somehow close that. Zoom in a little bit for our friends. And at that point, then what we've got is it's just going to execute this, which is in the command structure. And at the moment, we've just got the standard hello world as part of the default. Then we've got a make file, which is installing Cobra and then building the green. So what I can do is I can do make build dash green. And that's going to build the program and put the executable into a bin folder. So I can now execute that bin folder. If I can even type the right things, bin, what's it called? Copper Monkey Green. And you can see the hello world. And if I do something like help, I should be able to get the help back that's coming really from Cobra. Right, the next thing is I just want to separate this out. What we should have is in the packages folder, I should have something like green. So if I rename this to maybe green, and in here I'm going to have the features for doing this command, all the things that green does. So when I say green, I mean Copper Monkey Green. So Copper Monkey being the payment platform system and green being that stripe that we saw. So let's see if I can even separate that out. So that's the first thing to do. Let's go, where am I? Summon command, root command, here we go. And I'm just going to be silly, but what I'm going to do is let's create a new file in packages green and call this root. Let's insert, let's package green, import Cobra and format. And then if we write that, what I want to do, sorry for the noise, what I want to do is just create the function inside here that's going to do something. And I want to kind of keep it simple. So if we do something like func hello world, then we can basically print this out and say hello world. And kind of separate all the actual implementation of the fact that it's a Cobra command. You know, if there's going to be parameters to this, I can add parameters and I can make that struct, which will do the parameters. And then the command, the packages, they're like separate. We could use them on their own. So an API could actually call these functions and do work, and Cobra can call these functions and do the work. The API will have some JSON syntax in there, which will validate the contract for that. And Cobra will have the validation for the command lines, which will validate that, and then simply just push this data to these functions. So that's going to be pretty nice. If we write that, just add that to here. Yeah, that looks okay. In green, root command. So how do we link this up is the next question. So instead of this printing hello world here, what I really want is I want to import the format tool. And there are many ways to do this, and I will clean this up as we go. But basically, I just want Copper Monkey to use the package. And that would be then green. And that should import the green package if all is good. So if we do green hello world there, if we write that, if I jump to definition, does that work? It does. Awesome. So that's pretty good. So what we've done is we've decoupled. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some validation rules in. I'm going to clean this up. And when we run other commands and we add other commands, I can put the validation in there, which will then come back to the command line saying, you know, you didn't provide the client ID, you didn't provide the details that were required. So for instance, we want a type. We don't need the date because that's going to be generic. We need a customer ID and we need the amount. So we need the type, which is really like the command, which I think will change. So let's change that to command. We need our action. I think action is probably a bit more human friendly. And when I talked at the beginning, I talked about putting stuff on cards. Yeah. You write down on the cards what this should look like, and you and your team use the cards and you pass them backwards and forwards. And you know, the guy who's doing the Stripe integration will say, I need this property XYZ. And they all look at each other and say, where should we get that? And where in this journey should that property be added to this message type? And it's a really good game because it means that your team learns and your team adapts, and you can build up these contracts before you've written any code. Now, I'm not saying waterfall. But what I am saying is, in a big company, each one of these would be done independently by a separate team. So each one of these stripes would be done, but you still need to work out what your data looks like. And even now, I'm making changes, right? Added an action and I added an amount. So we're making changes to this contract all the time. So if we think about that, I'm not going to do that yet. We've got the hello world. What should we do in green? Well, first off, this build, right? I'm celebrating a win, but I've not even. Let's do it. Make. What's it? Can't remember bloody the make command. Was it build green? I think it was. Yeah. So that built, and then if we run it, in copper green, we get hello world. So need to layer on now, well, soon, unit tests onto this, because what I want to start doing is TDD. And I don't actually have debugging enabled at the moment on NeoVim. I normally dive, if something gets complicated and something gets to a point where I have to debug and look at variables as I'm stepping through stuff, I've either made something too complicated because I can't just fix it within a build test loop. I open up Visual Studio Code and I can do Visual Studio Code's got a great debugger on there, so I can just step through and F11 and F10 into things and just debug. So I want to start off as soon as possible getting into a TDD system. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure where I should start doing that. The diehards would tell you, like before you've even wrote a line of code. But I don't think I've even got my project in a workable state yet. Right, so if we have a look at green, could I just get jumped into there. But here's root, which is a really bad name, but it doesn't really matter. What we need to do in this is we need to create this payment request. Now, is that all that this thing needs to do? It is at the moment, this is the spec, but if we think about it, we might need to get them, we might need to delete them, we might need to update them. Is this the right place for doing that? At the moment, I think it is, but it would mean that I'd have to keep creating all of these for delete payment request, get payment requests, add client payment requests, get client payment requests, and so on and so on. But for now, let's just focus on the very basics. What I want is I want some kind of Cosmos DB running. And I've done this before, I've done this quite a few times. But I need a Cosmos DB. I need to create a table that's going to have this kind of data, or the page reference, and then insert that JSON. So let's create a function. In fact, before we do that, let's create the contract. I'm not quite sure where the contract should live. Where in the folder structure the contract should live, because it would be good if the commands held the same structs that the packages do, so that they're the same. Because, you know, if I want to add event ID, action, date, customer ID, and amount, it might be nice to have that everywhere. But the problem is that I'm going to want to decorate that with JSON validation parameters, and then JSON validation parameters don't match when using the command line. So that's something that I struggle with, and I've seen this in loads of projects where it's the same struct but in multiple places, and I really dislike that, because you've got to change one, you've got to change the other, right? But maybe that's just a byproduct of what it is that we're doing. I've seen it in all the places where there's an interface that holds the system, and there's like a shared common component, library, reference, NuGet, package, whatever. And then you make your own classes or your own records based off that in C#. And then you don't add any business logic to it. There's the skinny DTOs, and that's fine. And then you can decorate them with JSON attributes or with other stuff that can implement validation, like fluent validation, C# again. So the most difficult thing with projects is getting started, getting that initial layout, getting the initial thing that you can then start writing code on top of. Then it's just a matter of working stuff out, right? Working out where to put stuff. Like, how do you write to a database? How do you delete from the database? It becomes pretty simple then. So what do I want to do? I think what I'll do is we'll just start off with a func that's going to write into the database. And that is part of the command which we called add client payment request. Add client payment request. So here, print add client payment request. And for now, I might just make this the struct type add client payment request struct. And of course we can't do that because there'll be a clash. Add client payment request data. And we've got an event ID. We have an action. We have a date. And I think using the variable date is wrong. Once again, once we were using the cards and we were discussing it, I would have chirped in and said, I don't like date, because what does date mean? And date is also a data type, so it can mess with other stuff, because you might have a type which is called date, then you've got a property called date, and it's too much for me. It just pickles my brain. So date requested as a string, and we're going to change these types later on to the right types. So amount, yep. Okay, so we've got amount, string, da 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 da. Write that. Format buffers. Get it cleaned up. So we have got now data, and then we can just say, call that out. That's right. Okie dokie. So what have we got? Adding client payment request dot data undefined. I'll clean this up in a sec. We're just trying to get the basic skeleton right. Come on, let me dive out and write. Awesome. So I'm just getting the basics. I'm going to change the types. I'm going to update this. But if we now go back to green, root, nope, that's the same file. So insert dot construct. So data equals that. I'm going to create an empty one like that. So this is green data, add data. And pass it in. Let's see what error message we're getting. It's difficult to see because it goes off the screen and I can't see it. I'm trying to have it zoomed in so that you can see. So make why can't I remember what the bloody make command is? Make its build green, I think. So what have we got? And this is just probably just a type. Green value of type is not used. Not used. Command green. Add client payment data. Value of type package green. Add client payment request data. Oh. Deleting word. So add client data request. It was a bit daft that the IntelliSense did that. The autocomplete did that. I'm trying to call a bloody struct as a function. Daft thing. Okay. So make build green. That built. Awesome. Let's run it. Bin copper green. And adding client payment request, and of course nothing in there because we didn't add the request. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another command before I go too far, which is green. Or do I? Because this is the green CLI at the moment. Yeah, so I need one which is the command add client payment, which is then going to request and validate that I've passed in the parameters. So at the moment, we're still sat in Cobra land. We've not got anywhere yet. I really wanted to get to the part where we're actually writing to the database. But you can rush these things. You can dive too far, and you end up having a lot of code in a not so great state. The idea is that you're going to go back and fix it. Nah, you're not. When your product owner's on your shoulder saying, when can this be released? When directors are coming in, kicking bins and screaming, you ain't gonna go, I'll just go back and refactor that, I'll clean that up. The first iteration is the first one that goes out, which then you on to the next project, right? So you gotta use a bit of common sense. So if I have a look now at Cobra's docs, we've got the very basics. Validation. Okay, so position of customer arguments. Validation of positional arguments can be specified using arg fields of the command. Blah blah blah. So if length of arguments is that. No, there's a better way than just args, surely. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. So what we've got here, if length of arguments is below 1, then you know we need at least one argument. My app is valid and passed in argument 0. I've seen better than this. I've seen it where it's actually named types. I've worked on other projects where you use Cobra and you actually use like a key value pair. So if you want the variable to be called X, Y, Z, you can have arguments key X, Y, Z, and the key is the value, obviously, key value pair. Using args is bloody C plus C C++. This is better than this, and I know it is. Or I've worked on something that's put a wrapper around these things. So args, minimum number of args. time. So let's have a look. Use times string to echo. So ergs, minimum number of ergs is 1. And when we run, we pass in ergs, and we pass in ergs to the runner. Then we echo out. So where did that command times flags? You can add flags in. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, so you have a flag and you say what the value is, and then you can give documentation. That will then go into this, and you should be able to use the variable times as a key. I'm sure you are. I'm not, unless I've dreamt it, or I worked on something where someone had created a wrapper over the top of this. I know I've just repeated myself, but this all looks painful. So what's happening here is we've got the commands that we want to run. We're going to add some flags to say what it needs to do. Echo times is an address reference to echo time, which is that. We're going to add some parameters onto this. We're going to say that the parameter is times and the shortcut is T. Default is 1, the message that goes out. But we're still using ergs as just an array type. Weird. I might look into this and see. I think it's fine for now, but I'm going to look in to see if I can work out how to get the key value per one, or whether I've dreamt it and it doesn't exist, just craziness. So let's see if I can extend this. So what do I want? I want the amount. I think is a good one to start off with. So let's say ergs. Cobra, minimum number of ergs is 1. If we write that, and then make build green. Bin. Monkey. We should get an error because we need at least one argument, right? And we didn't provide one. So at the moment, this is asking for Hugo as a flag, but we can change that. So if we say Hugo, test, doesn't run, maybe just test. It's just one argument. Yeah, now we've got one argument. Don't know how you're recorded. Stop you. Oh, my mouse is gone. Hopefully the recording's okay. Test, test, test. The sound seems okay. Let's double check that nothing's gone askew with. Test, test, test. This is test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you've all been able to hear me. Apologies if not. So let's turn that off. Okay. Right. So we've got this, and now we're asking for one command, which is cool. What we're going to do now is filter that command. We're going to get the amount out of it. So we're going to use this. Get the ergs. We should have this here. So ergs 0. In fact, I don't want ergs. Ergs 0 would probably be the command that we want to run. For instance, delete, update. So I need to have a bit of a play about with this, because I want parameters to this. I want to be able to add parameters to say what the amount is, but I want parameters that are on the command, which is a subcommand. So I think I'm already probably going quite deep. This isn't just a command that's got some arguments in it. This is going to eventually be you're going to run copper copper monkey green, and then you're going to provide the command that you want to do. For instance, create request, delete request, list requests, and they're going to be arguments to that. So they're going to be sub commands, and I'll show you that at a later date. But for now, let's just see if I can actually get the argument out of there and put it into amount. What the hell was that? What even was that? There we go. And we want to convert that to int, really, because what we want is we want amount to equal amount, but you're going to get a casting problem. So let's build that and run that. It built. I suppose the input is there. I just didn't think that that would cast. It probably doesn't at runtime. Okay, so that passed through. I am surprised actually, because of the data types. I didn't think that I didn't think runes and strings converted that well. Oh, I've not changed my data types yet. That's the reason why I didn't do my data types yet. String is just so easy to work with that whilst you're playing around, make everything a string and then convert them, and then start doing your casting and your validations on your data types. Very lazy. It's not a pattern that I'd recommend you get into, but it's also a pattern that's very difficult to get out of once you're in it, because it's so super easy, because you can just focus on writing the code. So this is fine. However, I actually don't want this. What I want is to be able to do things like copper monkey green, add client payment request, amount 100. or £12.99. What was it? Customer ID. Then, they're good. That's the kind of thing that I want. I want to be able to pass in them requests, and then of course there'll be delete client payment request and so on that allow us to extend this. So we can see how I'm not just providing arguments to copper monkey green. So I don't want like copper monkey green amount £12.99, right? I don't want that, because then I can't, that means that this thing is only responsible for adding a client payment, but that's not the way it is. Right, dog's going absolutely nuts because someone's just posted something through the letterbox and the dogs are now ripping it to shreds. So I'm not quite sure whether we needed it, but whatever it was, we no longer have it. Anyhow. So I've been recording now for about 45 minutes. We kind of got the idea of what it is that I want to do. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some more research and play about and refresh my mind about the types. What we'll do in the next video is we'll layer how to do the commands, and we'll get this into a state where we're able to validate the types and put validation on them. What we'll also do is maybe create an API that does the same. I'm not quite sure. Then we can, once we've got that skeleton, we can then start really writing the code of implementing the client payments and add client payment requests. We can actually start filling the code here to write to the database. But at that point, that code's, really copy and paste from the internet type stuff, because writing to a database is just writing to a database. It's all about how you want to do it. But if we use the packages and we keep things clean, we then should be able to replace Cosmos DB with some other database structure or something, and it really won't make any difference. So as long as we keep that clean, we use interfaces and dependency injection where possible, and we don't rely on concrete types, we're going to be good. So let's need to do, let's have a look at payment gateway. Once to green using Cobra, add and validate args. Create REST API endpoints. PKG. So what we're doing next, we're going to add the commands to Cobra Green, to Payment Gateway Green. We're going to add the and validate the arguments so that the data that's being passed in to the package is validated. And then we're going to create a REST API endpoint to access it. The argument is, one of the arguments, and there are many, is if we have this package and this package is going to take these parameters, should we not also be adding validation here? And that's always a pain point. If you have validation at client side, like in JavaScript, and you don't have validation server side, then that's a security bug, because anyone can just bypass that JavaScript and do stuff and override the settings. So if you have something that validates that a payment cannot be over £50, then you can just bypass that JavaScript and put in £1 billion, or change the client ID, or change, other things that you were not allowed to do as a user. So the validation also needs to be server side. But life can get really annoying if you're validating in the command, validating in the API, and also validating within here. That's 3 possible different validation routines that if things change and you're now allowed to put an amount in of £60, you got to update all 3. So you maybe have one central validation rule somewhere that says what all the different validations are, but we're not there yet. We'll work on that once we get to that. Of course, with a lot of the validation that for APIs, it's like JSON validations, attributes. So that stuff really doesn't work when you're just in here. And there's nothing stopping anyone, including this as a library, and just running this function, right? This can be called from anywhere. I don't know why jump to references didn't work, but oof, what did you do? Jump. References. Just didn't work a second ago. So there you go. There's nothing. We could have other people who have imported this, other people in the business that are using this, and they run this, and it doesn't work. Well, if we're obviously open sourcing this, so we need to protect people from running this function directly without clear validation. Well, that means we've got to put validation in 3 places. Okay. To do. So yeah, add commands, add the validation, and create a little basic REST API that we can call and can start testing that. Then we can get all the moving parts. I think that's enough. Make sure saved everything. So as always, thank you for watching.